priority capital projects that council forwarded to Daniel, I guess. And then Public Works is going to run through their presentation, and then I'll look at a few numbers, grants and revenues, and just a draft of the financial plan. And I have added here potential workshop for next Tuesday, so that we can review the expenditures and revenues and asset requirements. So, and then just a reminder that March 11th, the financial plan bylaw will be going to committee of the whole. This next workshop. Okay, so I guess these are the results that came in for the council's picks.
I didn't participate in this, and I'd like to explain that I don't agree with this approach. I think that we're basically getting what appears to me as token involvement in something that is management's responsibility to recommend to us how best to make this organization work, and how these items are rated, I think, is more a management role recommending to council than a council role of putting votes on the system. It's asking us as amateurs to basically make decisions on limited amounts of information on a variety of items, where I believe it should be management instructing us on what they consider in their professional opinion to be the direction we should go. Anyway, good speech, eh?
Can I rebut that? Respectfully disagree with what you said?
You always do.
I looked at the ratings that were done by our management team, and we did this, excuse me, last year was the first year we did it. And I think all of them are important to our management team, but as members of council, we're asked to give direction of what's important to us. You know, I mean, we're the ones that are supposed to be driving the bus, and just giving direction to our staff is, these are the things that we find priorities, and to give the top 5. And what I did was I looked at the ratings that management put, and where I agreed with them, I put that as a priority, and where I didn't agree with them, I chose something else that I felt was of a priority. But I like being included in this, and I think it's a good way to go.
Words. I don't mind the exercise, I guess, for better or worse, because I just saw it as we can't afford everything. Which are our priorities that we think that we can afford? Is basically the way I saw it. But at the end of the day, you know, I hear what the mayor's saying, because, and I'll just go with something that I know, that we're going to have to fund some of these poll changes if we're going to keep the system up and running. And even though I got a 0 score, for the safety and operation, like you said, the professional saying that this has to happen, for it to be wiped out isn't the right answer either in my books. But
Well, in that same token, Ron, I thought that, like some of the electrical things, like the pole changes, and that should have been just like one. Like there was 3 or 4 different ones under there, so just put, we need to do this, the total cost for the whole project is $150,000. Fine. Other than I had now to determine which one took priority in my mind, and not really getting that, so they just say, we have to do all this, and that's how much it's gonna cost. That would have been work for me better.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. I certainly, I kind of chuckled over it myself, because I was wondering who was going to tabulate the votes, all that sort of thing. I really appreciated the staff putting it together for us. I hope in 3 years' time, I'm way better at it, and that I'm better informed, Because that's what I feel is incumbent upon staff, is to inform us so that we can make worthy decisions. Other thing, and I've said this before, I do not want to be patronized. I don't want anybody to think you're too dumb to know this. That's not what I'm about. I want to know all of it, and I want to know as much as I can about it. So I'd like to be included in the background. I like detail. This is me personally. Also with the realization that I can't know it all, but I have to know enough to make reasonable judgments about it. So I thought it was an interesting exercise. I kind of like that. I kind of hear what you just said, Counselor, about, and what you said, Counselor Zelinski, about, yeah, some of the stuff that's got zero. Wow, that doesn't make any sense, because we're gonna have to do it anyways, right?
Yeah,
So-
and on that note, again, I think I mentioned this last time, is to look at this list and not look at the 20-year capital plan to say, how can we shift things so that we are funding $1 million in capital each year and not 10 million this year, and, oh, everything got done, and it's only 1 million next year, and this is a real financial juggling act type thing. I find that type of information missing in the overall.
I get lost between the distinction between operating and capital. It seems to me like pole replacements. Isn't that like operating? I mean, that stuff's, or printers, I mean,
Yeah.
this stuff wears down, I mean.
Please, didn't we have that argument 2 days
Yeah.
ago last week?
Well, it's
Yeah.
true though, that's how.
Materiality.
Well, and we do have
Separate
definitions
too.
that divide those items, and we've argued
Want to go
them.
do
Although
some work?
they may not seem logical, they are the rules of operation.
Yeah, I have my official definition for you.
Okay.
Tangible capital assets are non-financial assets having physical substance that, this is the pertinent clause, have useful economic lives extending beyond an accounting period. So if it meets the threshold and it meets this definition, then it needs to be.
What is the
capitalized.
accounting period?
Well, a year,
1 year.
yeah.
Okay, can you throw that at me again, please?
Tangible capital assets are non-financial assets having physical substance that have useful economic lives extending beyond an accounting period. So basically, if it lasts more than a year,
But it's a physical,
Then- yes,
it's a
physical
physical
asset.
asset, yeah. And that's where my argument as far as planning studies aren't part of it, but anyway.
Okay. But again, that's a stall point, and so, something funny you want to share with the group?
No, sorry, Mayor, we're talking about things that lasting a year. Oh my goodness.
Okay, well, I'm not sure where to, you're getting a flavor of our input here. And I'm assuming that, part of this was to get the political reading as much as our technical reading on some of these items. But I still favor recommendations being supported that bring.
Yeah, it was in regards to seeing where council's priorities would be for staff to invest the majority of their time, or to get going on certain projects that are really important. If council doesn't want to do this at the next go around, that's fine, we'll take it out. We just did it last year with the last council, and it seemed to work great there for participation and to get communication flowing. So if
I recognize
yeah,
that
so
you did, it's not the first year you've done it. And
yeah.
I think we can modify it with the feedback.
Well, when I was going through all this stuff, I also was reading the DMAP grant and trying to figure out exactly what so what would be on this list that might be covered in that. And so that crossed for me. So there, that's why I.
Tremendous
I did.
task you place in front of us. What's your decision?
That was where I went, and that was cross matching everything. So,
Every day.
yeah, well,
Well, I wouldn't think anything on this list would be included in the.
well, you've got your inflow, your flood alert, your storm water management, all those things that,
Is that in the application?
no, but I found that I had to read it too, but it could be in small print, I don't know. Maybe just the overview.
Even things like the industrial lift station could be affected.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So that took a lot of
Yeah.
Captain sent it over, right?
Oh.
Are we going back to the document we did for the last meeting?
Sort of.
Yes.
Okay.
Anyways, so that's where I was.
Okay, so this is the operations budget portion of the workshop, so you saved the best for last. Thank you for that, Council.
Nice.
We wanted to highlight the role of outside works and how it plays in the quality of life for the residents of Grand Forks. So a lot of people look at this this picture and with the question on top, what quality of life do you want in Grand Forks? There's a lot of great things in this picture. So if you ask people, what do you see? They'll say, oh, we see a spray park and lots of people and the green grass. Not a lot of people see what goes on behind the scenes to make this picture a reality. You can see the sound trailer there. There's putting the benches in around the spray park that was done by staff, the irrigation installation, the sod, making sure the washrooms were cleaned and stocked, the traffic control for the event. There's a lot that goes on behind the scenes to make the events and that a success.
Other question that comes up is whether it's optional to have the maintenance that happens, just how far can we cut back on this stuff before it starts to really affect people. So what I've done here is I've pegged it to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. If anyone's familiar with that, it's going from the bottom to the top is what kind of intersection there is between the services provided by outside works and what we need as humans. So at the bottom, we have our basics, our shelter, our comforts, the water, sewer, and electricity. We move up into safety once we've got those established. So we have our street lighting and maintenance, and we have our public places like parks and playgrounds. And then we have expression and love and belonging in those public places and supporting events that allow for people to come out and have that shared experience with others where they're out enjoying themselves in public. And then we have the competition and esteem where you can triumph over your neighbor on a sports field or in the pickleball court. And of course, we all hope that it leads to people being their best self. So I would argue for a good portion of the services provided by outside works, it is a need, not a want. And you can see here people out enjoying themselves in public in Grand Forks from various events or places around town. And so all of these places where people go and enjoy themselves are supported by Outside Works Department in terms of creating them into what they are, creating them into the safe and enjoyable places.
So why Outside Works is successful? It's got to do with the daily interactions with the residents. We have the electrical crew, the water, sewer, and public works that are on standby 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. They're a public face in the city. So they're out there, there's 32 staff, so there's 17 FTEs, and we have 14 students, temps, 1 flood recovery support person. They're out there, they're making that face-to-face contact with people on a daily basis. So you add the budget money, you add the best people, hardworking, dedicated staff that take great pride in their work, and that's going to equal the quality of life for the residents of Grand Forks. You look at the relationships, so in the center, you have the staff, and that's the key to the relationships. The residents, the daily interactions, both in the during the work hours out in the field, and also after hours in the grocery stores. You have our staff constantly with that face-to-face interaction, getting asked questions about what they do and how come they do it. We look at the visitors. We have staff as mentioned, working through the weekends and the evenings, providing services, including, the events. They're working at a campground, and they're dealing with things on a very personal level with funeral services and medevacs and different things that not everybody always considers, but that's another piece that we take care of. You look at the business and industry relationship, and we worked hard on trying to create a good relationship with our Downtown Business Association and our major industries. I know with our industries, since the flooding, we have discussions on a regular basis, and we keep in touch, about what the other one is doing and how we can work together better. I know the DBA had some, Downtown the Business Association, had concerns, and they invited us to their meeting, and we went and, were able to have a conversation and discuss, where we were at, what we were trying to achieve, and how we were trying to get there, and it was well received and much appreciated, I think. Also met with Rotary and did a presentation just on some of the capital projects and what the city's working towards.
And we're not just full of it. We actually track what we do, have a look at how well it's going, and make decisions based on that feedback. So if you look at what we do, and the performance indicators should be coming with the annual report this year again. But nonetheless, you can see the stuff from last year, just as an idea of what we look at in terms of the snapshot. So can we do better? Absolutely. What is that based on? Where are we going to target our efforts? And that comes from looking back and evaluating what we've done and how it contributes to the quality of life in Grand Forks. We also did a satisfaction survey in 2017, and that was a follow-up on another survey. And this is where we really get to focus on the good. Overall, you see a lot of green out there. You see some things, road maintenance and repairs. Well, everybody hates potholes and snow removal. So, we know that. We try to manage it. We do try to allocate more resources when we can to things like paving. So if anyone has a sharp eye, they'll notice that we're looking for a bit more cash this year for pothole patching and our paving program than in other years. And part of that's because of the feedback. We want to respond when we get information from the public so that we can do better and end up having more green on this chart. This is also where I'll throw out the gauntlet to the other departments, where we are actually the best department, and we know this because of the satisfaction survey. So we would say, if you want to be as good as us, we can offer you some tips there, or we'll continue to ride at the top.
So with this satisfaction survey, we are following within our policy guidelines. So Kevin did mention snow removal as kind of a hot button topic, and as we get later in the year, it gets hotter and hotter. People are tired of shoveling in that, but we always stay in line with our policies that council has set for us. So you'll see that coming back to council this next year for review. So if council's happy with the level of service, then
I see we're not doing great in weed control. I've heard that critique before, but in fact there are a lot of challenges, I understand, to staying top of our own weed issues.
Right. So this last year, in 2018, we did have Barb Stewart from the Boundary Invasive Weeds, I believe it's Society, come out and do an invasive weed inventory of what we have and try to put together a bit of a plan on how we can better manage that. So we did take the survey into heart and try to correct that. And some highlights for 2018. We tried to make the electrical system more reliable. We did the voltage conversion. We looked at the trails and the sidewalks and the roads, so the safety of the transportation. We had provided safe and potable drinking water throughout the year and even through the flood. And we had our inspection chamber for the sewer services going on. So we did lots of installations of backflow prevention, and we also came to council with a urban forest policy. Kevin, I don't know if you want to speak about the water conservation piece.
So last summer, we did a bit of a test program based on the recommendations on how to conserve more water. Because when you look at our water usage, it's mainly in irrigation. You know, the system is only at capacity when people are sprinkling heavily. So looking at ways to reduce that, the most obvious one is to only put as much water as you actually need on your lawn if you're going to maintain your lawn with an automated sprinkler. And so we had a summer student that was able to educate residents both at public events as well as by organizing some time to look at their systems and give them tips on what the best practice was, you know, how long they should be sprinkling to get enough moisture into their lawn.
How is it affected now that people are paying for water? They're still expected to obey water regulations even though they're saying we're paying for our usage?
Absolutely, they would be expected to. It is in the bylaw, so they would be expected to.
That's not an excuse.
It's not. No, it's not an excuse. What happens when you don't have sprinkler regulations? Part of it is just balancing things out. The reason why it's odd and even, or some days and other days for different sides of the street, is so that you don't have these harsh peaks that will max out the system for 3 hours in the week.
Right.
You want to spread it. You want to. What they call it in the electrical department is peak shaving, but it's the same idea in water. Is you want to make sure that you have enough water for everyone, and we can do that partially by making sure that people are using it for high water activities at different times of the day or different days of the week.
Excellent.
Can you just touch a little bit more on your urban forest plans and whether or not there's an actual tree trimming program as far as street by street, or it's we'll just tackle the same tree that's closest to the shop and keep happening on that one? Or,
So last year, council adopted the urban forest policy, and within that policy, there were a number of follow-ups that we are still working on adopting. So right now, it is a fairly reactive program where we look at trees that are either identified as danger trees by a qualified assessor, or that are touching the primary lines, or that we can otherwise observe to be in poor condition. But the follow-up from the urban forest policy was to have a more or a regular inspection program that would be less reactive.
okay, tough question. What's the number of the urban forest policy?
Try 1105, and if I'm wrong, that's because it's just in my head.
Okay, so close to. Thanks.
So does your urban forest policy have replacing the trees that are being taken down or whatever? Do you have succession plan on the trees?
Yeah, there are guidelines in there for succession planning, but it isn't a procedure. So while it lays out the structure for the follow-up, it doesn't lay out the specifics.
I don't too sure. I hope this fits in with your presentation. There has been some work on the cemetery. It's sort of ongoing. There's been placement of benches, and of course the expansion of the dog park. But I think that was the year prior to that. How does that expansion working? Is there what other things are planned for that cemetery? I know the development of the east side of it has been on the works for a gazillion years. Is that going to go ahead this year or shortly, or what? Where are we with that?
So a new block was just opened up last year, I believe, or the year before.
I don't think it's
No,
open yet.
Nope,
It was
not yet.
on the other side, yeah.
It's not
Okay.
open yet, but that's sort of my question. When is it going to be open, or what's the plan with that?
We're looking at the need, and a lot of people are going from full burials to cremation,
Yes.
so they're putting more people in certain spots, which is allowed under our bylaws. So we will look at doing some work there. Our focus this year has been more for, well, last year was obviously flood related.
Right.
This year, it looks like will be flood-related and economic development, so
Right.
probably won't be this year.
Won't be this year. Got it.
Just a question on cemetery. I know when I was still working, I was looking at having like a mausoleum where you have
Colberian?
columbarium.
Yes, that was my question.
Yeah, and have you considered that, looked at that at all?
We did look at a few, and it was about $25,000 for kind of a columbarium that we thought would suit the area or be a good fit, not too large, not too small. We were gonna try that and see just where it went, but in reviewing the capital projects, it was not identified as a high priority for that.
Well, how many crypts would be in that columbarium?
I think it was about a year ago I looked at it. I forget how many are on there, but
Well, it just
I
seems-
thought it was about $1,200 per spot.
Yeah, it just seemed, you know, the kind of the way I thought we should be going.
The right thing to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of people are also supporting that. I had a number of people come and ask me about that, and what are you doing about that?
Can we put it on that infrastructure list? Can we vote on that?
Build a columbarium,
Too
sure.
late.
So maybe that's something you could look at for next year then.
Yeah.
Yeah. So some of the other work that was a highlight for us, upgraded Dick Bartlett Park, so that was work that our work crews did. So they added concrete underneath the bleachers for cleaning the area up, and they redid the backstop, and they redid the infield according to what the baseball league requested. The campground and RV sites, so they planted lots of trees that were over time vandalized or had died due to water issues or what have you.
Deer rubbing.
Yeah, deer, lots of things there, so we planted 30 fast-growing ones there this year, or last year, sorry. Built 250 feet of new sidewalk, so that was on top of the hill on the north side of Central Avenue. We're hoping to do another section this year, further down, to complete the sidewalks along Central Avenue. And Kevin can talk a little bit about the wayfinding signs.
So this was part of a longer-term project that took a few detours, but nonetheless, we did get the posts in the ground and most of the signs up last year for the first part of the wayfinding. And you can see them, they're the colorful signs on the black posts around town. And we do have more signs we'll be putting up in the spring that we didn't put up over the winter for, getting in the way of snow plows in our down season.
Okay, just two questions on this slide. 250 feet of new sidewalk, operations or capital?
Capital.
Okay. And when are we gonna see the expo sign completed?
Depends on your definition of completed. The letters are there. It was kind of revamped for a certain section.
Okay. So before long weekend in May?
The letters will be installed before the long weekend in May.
Okay, thank you.
Also, not to be forgotten, with the highlights as mentioned this morning, the outside works crew supports the fire department or YRB or whatever event comes up, whether it be flood or fire or fuel leaks or whatever. So that's something that kind of goes unspoken about or unnoticed sometimes, but I just wanted to highlight that, the outside works crew is always there and steps in and helps out whenever possible. So really can't say enough about the people we have out there. So this, in summary, when we get the budget money and we put together the best people that we have out there and the culture we have, equals a great quality of life for the citizens of Grand Forks. So, thank you.
And I think what council is looking for is a town that's beginning to look prosperous again. We're coming back, we're doing well. So the baskets are great, the stuff you do with the planters. Those are things I think that have a big signal to anyone driving through or dropping into our town.
Yeah, just on that note, I don't think those things are cemented in stone, if you want to say that. But we don't, unless we see a detailed budget, it'd be nice to know how much we're spending on event support, on hanging baskets, because it's my impression hanging baskets or flower beds or whatever have been up and down with the budget and whatnot. But you're right, I would rather see make sure we're $50,000 in greenery, because I think that's what makes our town. But without seeing those line items, we really don't know what the trend has been and stuff, so.
Right. And we have had some fluctuations in there. Some were council driven. Others were just employee, like personnel. We didn't have the people to go around and spend the time to water all the planters and the hanging baskets and that. So over time, we've tried to be more efficient. So it takes a little more time up front, but we've added underground irrigation to all the hanging baskets. So we only put them up in spots that we don't have to go around and water every couple of days. So there's small things like that we're trying to do. We try to cluster together the planters so that we're not spread out. It's faster for watering. But as for line by line, we have been requested in the past from council to bring forward kind of a summary of events and what they spent on the last year and what we're kind of working towards. It's kind of difficult in some situations because we're trying to grow the events. We're trying to, and some events, I'll use CanadaFest as an example. We had lots of support in the first couple of years for CanadaFest, and now that they're well established, they're basically self-contained. They do a great job by themselves, and we have supported them very little help. So. It's always fluctuating, it's always changing.
Yeah, I guess one thing that I noticed, and I realized summer was crazy and whatnot, but I sure enjoyed the winter baskets when they were hanging up a year ago. I think that added a bit to the downtown and whatnot. Again, please.
Yeah.
So, do you, for our flowers and the hanging baskets and the big pots and that, do we grow our own or do we buy them from other nurseries?
So we do a mix. So we have in the past bought everything from the nurseries, and we're really trying to limit what we do keep in the greenhouse, because it does cost a fair bit to keep throughout the winter. So we actually section it off to a small section. We'll keep the banana plants and the different things that you couldn't grow in 1 year that have that beauty in there. So we do try to keep it to a minimum, and then we purchase a fair bit from the different
On the annuals and stuff.
yeah, from surrounding greenhouses, and then we plant them and we root them for a certain amount of time so that the deer don't go and pull them out and spin them on the highway like was done in the past. So
Okay.
The use of fields, play fields, needs to be coordinated between the regional districts and yourself and the school board, right? How is that coordination of care for the playing fields going?
It's gotten better over the years. It was, we didn't have a good communication stream before, but I think it's one of those relationships that's grown, and they send us the information that we need and how we can better support their needs, I guess. So they used to just block things off and say, for the summer, this is kind of what we need, and we said, well, we can't do good support if we have a soccer camp or something that comes in. Yes, the field is booked, but we need some additional information, make sure we have the washrooms open. And so we're definitely going in the right direction for that, I think.
Excellent. Yeah, I remember it's been an outstanding problem.
Just a question, and it's, well, sort of semi-budget related. What is all the red stuff that's hanging in Gerald Park? The draping and stuff? Is that for Valentine's Day or what?
So that is a public demonstration, and it is for the missing and murdered Indigenous women to call attention to it.
What, 1 day or 1 week, or how long are they up for?
We'll have to check on that and get back to you.
They've done it before.
Okay, I just noticed it this morning.
Yeah, they were in, by the gallery too, a couple years ago, if I remember.
So flood mitigation, was a big part of your 2018 work plan, I'm assuming, like whether it was the flappers or the, on the sewer outfalls, or not sewer outfalls, storm sewer, any storm water outfalls, and our dike repair, right? I guess my question is, David, and I don't know if this is the right time, is how are we looking for February 19th? I know that's, since you mentioned that date to me, it's on my calendar. I don't know if the rest of the council's got it on their calendar. It's on mine.
Yes, I see now why setback dikes are preferred. There's a lot of moving parts and pieces. We
Okay.
have about 8 different things we're trying to coordinate and bring together for the 19th.
Right?
I'm still waiting to hear from Department of Fisheries and Oceans and their involvement in the bank armoring and some of the management plans that we have to follow for them to
Right.
make sure that the fish on the endangered or rare species list are taken care of. So we also ran into a bit of a snag with some of the right-of-way pieces that we're trying to work through, trying to get all of that signed off and approved prior to any work starting. And some of the material, if you need a turbidity curtain, which we weren't 100% sure whether we needed one, and now it's been suggested we need one, and I'm not certain even this afternoon if it's 100% needed or not. Depending on the length and the material, it could be up to 3 weeks away. So that won't work, so we would be looking for a plan B or some other options, which I do have some emails. I haven't had a chance to check them today, but there's some other options out there we're pursuing. So unless we hear not the 19th, we're still trying to press on and get that work started around
So-
the 19th.
Other than approvals, you've got the material and you've got the workers set.
That's the easy part, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. We had the danger tree assessment, we had the habitat tree assessment, we are doing some work regarding some of the outcomes of those reports this week.
Okay.
Excuse me, I'm sorry, Chris, what's the turbidity thing?
The risk is, I guess, if you put certain material in flowing water, it's going to have that sediment that goes down. So it's permeable cloth that floats and has anchors that you set up that catches that sediment.
Okay, what's the lifespan of something like that? Is that just temporary or?
Yeah, no, it would be put in during construction and removed.
Oh, okay.
Is that
Okay,
work?
and-
Sorry.
Yeah, I think we are veering off to the left here a
Yeah.
bit in terms of this being in the detailed area again of how things are going, which you will have access to quickly.
It does keep me up at night, yes.
All right, further on the topic at hand.
All right, we'll go back to your original slide.
Oh, that's a review your budget numbers?
Our little detour is over.
So you're not gonna figure that out?
Thanks, Chris, for doing that so I could find out.
I didn't have it in mind.
Oh, you didn't? Oh,
No.
okay. Our detour's
Oh,
not
it's
quite
in
over
there,
yet.
yeah, it's in that one.
It's on the 19th too now.
So I'll just take that one.
Sure.
We'll whip through here pretty quick because you have this in front of you printed out in those nice Word document sheets. And we don't want to bore you with too many numbers here, but we have lots of stuff to maintain. And we intend to do it with this amount of money. Were there any questions on proposed allocations for Public Works? And we have five different categories within Public Works. Public Works Administration is management and our general admin costs for the department. And the others are as described: roads, parks, cemetery facilities,
I see
and
that the
airport.
roads, personnel is that just the redistribution of your staff?
So for roads, there is a temporary position that has been worked into the budget for this year. We are hoping to recover the cost of that, but it does need to be budgeted for expenditure.
You hope to recover through the emergency NACA?
Through disaster financial
Yeah,
assistance.
yeah, okay. Thank you.
Any questions on roads or public works administration?
Why is your personnel going up in roads?
So in roads, we have a temporary position that we put in there for expenditure, and we hope to receive it back from disaster financial assistance.
Okay,
So that specifically is for the flood support.
okay.
Yeah. So as Kevin mentioned, we expect to get reimbursed, but it's project by project, so we budgeted to ensure that we had the funding there.
Personnel under Public Works Administration, big jump from 2017. Even big jump from budget of 2018.
Yeah, so 2017 to 2018, I'll actually ask Juliet to speak
That
to.
was the redistribution.
Yeah, we made an accounting change and redistributing and reallocating from the other, like from finance and corporate.
Okay.
So that's probably a reflection of that.
Who's in charge of facilities?
I would be in charge of facilities right now, with Dave being in charge of me.
Oh, okay. Okay, so Mr. Bruce has no part of that 51,000 then?
None of that goes towards Mr. Bruce. No, we did have part of the industrial electrician budgeted this year into facilities. So because you guys play a pretty big role. Every building has electrical in it.
So since you brought up the topic, it was a temporary position when it began? Still a temporary position?
It's a temporary position until May of this year.
Okay. Until the budget's passed and then it's there. Okay, I got it.
Yeah, it was a one-year position, so it ran from last year, May, till this year, May. Again, with the changes, with flooding and everything, he wasn't able to do what we had hoped he was able to do. He is taking on some of our FSR things. He is reducing our subcontracts and some of our materials and supplies costs. So he was budgeted part-time under facilities, because that's in his job description, is to organize the contractors and that, and he does do that.
On a personal note for that position, I would sure like that position to get trained up to do our PLC work, or the programming and the controls of something like your reclosure and your OCRs and stuff like that. If we can get them into some industry training, so that we don't have to wait for someone from Nelson to come across to fix stuff.
I think that's a great suggestion.
Okay.
Any questions on facilities or airport? You'll notice that we did keep these budgets pretty much on par with the 2018 budget numbers.
So from the airport budget, can I assume, someplace will probably see it here, 60, 70 grand in fuel sales?
Under the
Purchase for
purchase
resale.
for resale line item is the purchase, and then the revenue you don't see here, but that would be in a separate revenue account.
I guess maybe my question is the airport as a net, we're still costing taxpayers about 90K on this budget. Is that?
We would have to recalculate that. Last year, we did have more fuel sales than we had budgeted for, which meant that we did bring in more revenue. So we would have to get updated numbers if you wanted the number for last year. Similar idea with these ones. There's some reallocation between categories, but we did keep the budgets nice and tight to last year.
What would the major contractual services entail?
For
parks?
parks, yeah, I mean, there'd be a variety of things if we had a repair that we needed to make that required an outside contractor. I don't know, Dave, what else would come to top of mind there? It's not so much 50,000 for one person. Julia, do you have it?
Oh, I was just gonna say, well, your campground.
Yeah, our campground
That's
operator
not
would be
huge, but-
a chunk of that, but it's spread across quite a few different contractors.
But a big jump for some reason. Like when you put all your numbers together, you jump for 25 grand or something.
Yeah, we did budget for some support on, like we were talking about with the urban forest policy, looking at getting some services or some contract services for development of that. Could be biologists or danger tree assessors that we bring in.
Yeah, I would say for contract services, danger tree removal was one area that we did put, I forget if it was 5,000 or more, maybe 8,000, something like that. But yeah, it was significant because there is a need where we have the pathway along Riverside that we've had complaints, and we go out and we assess them, and Mr. Gates is working on how we deal with the cottonwoods and moving forward with the Louisville woodpecker. So there's some cost involved with that.
Okay, over to you.
Okay, so electrical services, the quick rundown is we're one of 5 municipalities that have a distribution system that we operate. We bulk purchase power from Fortis BC, and then we resell it to our residents. We have about 50 kilometers of primary secondary lines, and again, our crew is on standby, or one of the crew members is on standby 24 hours a day. So the things we're looking at for this upcoming year, we want to make sure that we're regulatory compliance is in check with our operating permit. Always looking to maintain or improve service levels wherever possible. Again, the voltage conversion, I believe, will add some reliability to our system. Complete the condition assessment, so we have a crew going out. They're going to visit each structure, take an inventory of what's there and the condition of the assets, and then have that mapped on our GIS system. And then from that, we're looking at making a master plan. While they're visiting each structure, we're looking at changing out the LED streetlights, so it's one kind of foul swoop through the town. So it might take, we're kind of estimating 3 or 4 months to complete this project, and then start to rebuild the Valley Heights electrical lines, as we discussed in the capital meeting with council. We're looking at trying one of the end pieces and see if we can do that without significant, I guess, landscaping and tearing up sidewalks and that. So we're hopeful that we have the conduit in place. And then replacing the end-of-life poles and cross arms, those are one-offs that the crew does over the years. And then the standardizing the electrical meters, so that's where the electrician would go and change the meter bases and meters out.
Just a question on the, it's transformer related, but the ground transformers that you said, what impact did the flood have on some of those? Because I had heard that they were covered in water.
Right, so
Is
we
that what-
had to shut them all off during the event, and then we did oil samples from within in the transformer, and we sent them away just to see if there was damage. So there's a procedure for re-energizing them after such an event. So we had the electrician go through and follow our engineering guidelines of what we should do to turn them back on.
So if it was taken offline, how did those people get power?
Some didn't have power for a little while there.
In your budget, Dave, anything for, I'm gonna say beyond the meter, anything to encourage homeowners to either move their services or upgrade their services, or anything in there?
We looked at a different program that actually BC Hydro was doing with kind of cutting off loads during the day that weren't used. So it's, I forget the term of it. Kevin, maybe you can remember.
I don't remember the term, but we're looking at hot water tanks being the one way of managing loads, where if you can, it kind of like with the peak shaving we were talking about with the irrigation systems, if the hot water tanks are timed to go on at different times, and realizing that they would always kick on if there was a demand, but having the basic cycling to keep the water up. You know, you can imagine it in the morning and afternoon there's high use there, but in the middle of the day there's not necessarily a high use, or throughout the night. But
Yeah, that's not what I was.
Different program?
Yeah, more to, I'll take the Gazette building, where we, the city, was doing work. We wanted the building owner to help us and comply with stuff. So is any program to help offset the cost to improve our systems. You know, there's old meter bases out there that maybe at the back of the house that we want to move to the front, just for access more than anything. Anything in the budget to help the homeowner sort of work with us to get things a little better.
Right. So on the metering front, we are looking at standardizing our meters, so there will be some of these oddball meters changed out. But as for the business owner changing some things, we're open to working with them, but we don't have anything in the budget specifically to support them in that, unless it's like a Fortis rebate program, which they're eligible for.
Just since it was a topic today, you do realize that a bird strike should not lock out your enclosure?
We just had that conversation with our engineer, so
Okay.
he reset the settings on that. Yes.
Send them a bill.
So with this, you'll see that the budget was up a little bit, and this is due for the personnel piece. This was due for some of the temporary electrician, and some was for the personnel and the administration costs that were associated with the department weren't fully included. So whether it's support from capital projects that would save the department kind of money on the year-end actuals, or whether it was service extensions or different revenue that came into the department. So I'd like to see that we have everything fully budgeted for at the beginning of the year, with revenue and capital projects and that taken into consideration at the beginning. So we're fully funded and we're not dependent on any specifics to come in to make sure that we're balanced. That's just a note for.
Can I just make a comment on what Councillor Moslin mentioned as far as capital and operating and whatnot, and what we have on the agenda this afternoon, I believe it is, those feeder 3 and 5 poles or something, where you want to hire contractors to help the local guys do stuff. And that's where I would see that your contracted services here increase and it being an operating budget myself. Comment.
Yeah. As long as our bylaw fits that, I'm happy to see that, so.
Yes, Dave, I'm looking at the electrical utility. The budget is for $3,300,000. No, have I got that right?
That's
No,
just the
that's-
power purchase, that's the bulk power purchase?
Bulk purchase.
Oh, okay, and, all right, and then I'm looking at the revenue for the electrical utility revenue. It's budgeted for 2019 at $5 million. So are we making $1 million on the electrical? Is that what I'm getting? Like if our revenues after fees and we basically resell are $5 million, according to this, and the other one, on the combined there was for, we purchased Fortis from Fortis, 3.3 mil, and our other expenses were 700,000, that roughly adds up to 4 mil. And we're gonna make 5 mil, so that's $1 million we've captured, cleared on the electrical utility.
Right. I don't have it in front of me, but it
That
does
sound
go
about right?
into reserves.
That sounds about right.
Yeah, covers.
Okay, and it goes into, that million doesn't go back into electrical.
Well, it goes into the reserves.
It goes into the capital reserve.
It goes
I
into-
mean, directing it into the electrical capital reserve, but having said that, because that's such a large amount, and the other reserves, the other utilities and the general fund don't have enough money to transfer into reserves for what they need, there'll be a point where they'll have to transfer out, back out of the electrical utility.
Okay,
Sorry, the
I
electrical,
guess I'm just
capital fund.
kind of quickly reinforcing the case for having our own electrical utility.
Yeah, it's still a good deal for us.
Okay. And the flip side of that, Chris, is a utility should pay for itself. It shouldn't be another way to tax people and make $1 million.
No, true, this one is, so it is paying for itself.
Yeah.
Plus,
I think our 5-year financial plan has between $500,000 and $600,000 in the general revenue from electrical services.
from the electrical.
Not anymore.
Not anymore. No. Okay. We spent it all.
No, we just stopped doing that.
Yeah, at one
But
time.
It'll end up just going into the electrical capital fund and then probably from there having to be redistributed to another capital fund.
Yikes. Okay, we've got to keep that in mind because I'm sure when I was previously on council, there was 11 municipalities that had their own electrical utility.
Kelowna lost theirs, they got bought out.
Kelowna, Princeton.
Yeah, so that, the number I see now is 4.
No, there was never 11.
Wasn't there? Okay.
No,
Well, I stand
from us.
corrected then. Was-
Penticton, Kelowna, Princeton, and New Westminster.
That's Summerland is
Summerland,
there sometimes
yeah.
too.
Yeah, some of them too.
Okay.
Any other questions about the electrical? Okay, so the wastewater services. So this is right from the property line of the homes and goes through the piping system to the lift stations, down through to the treatment plant and the disinfection. So these are both departments, the water department and the wastewater department, share employees. So there's 4 people on the department as a whole. So some of the objectives we're trying to do this year, standardize the pumps to gain efficiencies. So we've reached kind of a timeline where our lift station pumps, it's hard to get parts for them, if we can get parts at all. So we've had to replace a couple of the pumps. So we're looking at the newer style of pumps with the VFDs built right into the pumps, so we can run them on a more efficient basis. And they have a feature where it auto reverses, so it does a cleaning cycle if it starts to overamp or plug up, which again saves the crew going out and pulling the pump and manually unclogging it. So we're continuing the inspection chamber program. So that's at the residence property line. We install a flap or a check valve that comes up to the property line, so you can unscrew the cap and look down and see if the issue is on private property or whether it's on public property. Continue to repairing the systems. So anywhere that we've been to more than once, and sometimes once, we have a video camera that we put down and we see the condition of the pipe. So if we go to a plug and we get it cleared up, we'll go down and take broken pipe out, or maybe it's just a joint with roots in it or something like that. But we'll try to eliminate going back there multiple times. Continue with the legislated safety training and the additional certification training for the crew. As mentioned, this crew takes care of the potable water system, so they have to be dual ticketed. And then commission wastewater treatment plant upgrades. So there's the large project going on, which hopefully will be done sometime in the fall this year, with the UV treatment facility also changing from chlorine disinfection to a UV disinfection. And we're renewing some old mains with relining. So a heads up for council that we will have a contractor in this week, next week, to do some line flushing, and they're going to do some cammering in certain identified areas. So up on the west end of town, Sunshine Way, there's an alley off of Central that they'll be on, and they'll be looking at 3rd Street downtown. So they're going to flush it, camera it, and then go away, make a plan, and they'll come back and they'll reline the sewer mains.
That could be expensive. If you put the camera down there, is that what I heard you say? Sorry. That could be expensive, because you might find out stuff that you don't really want to know.
We've already cambered it, so we have a pretty good idea what's down on those 3 sections.
Okay.
But, yeah.
And what's the size of the main?
It depends on the area. So
Okay.
in the alleyway, I think it's a 6-inch, but downtown it would be an 8-inch.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is 8-inch the biggest sewer main you have?
That's a good question. I think we have some 10-inch. I'm not sure if we have any 12.
Okay.
Yeah.
UV treatment,
Yes.
is it going to get completed this year?
Yes.
Yeah. It's been on the books for quite a few years.
It's been an ongoing project that was grant, yes, sure,
Okay.
grant supported. So we've just looked at the drawings. I think we have everything in place. They're looking at putting out the tender by the end of February for both the wastewater treatment plant and the UV treatment facility. So there'll be a new concrete tilt-up building eventually for both the solid waste handling, so the sludge handling with the sanitary treatment plant. And then we'll have another building at the end of the lagoon for the UV treatment.
Okay, so the contact chamber right now got flooded.
Yes.
Is the UV treatment facility in the same spot, or is it?
It was going to be.
Okay.
But we had talked with our engineers, and they're relocating it to the upper corner of the lagoon. Yeah. So for the 2019 budget for the wastewater, so this is taking account the administration allocation and the 2 employees for the personnel line.
That's a nice looking budget. It's nice and stable.
Yeah.
No, it's not.
No, it's pretty lean, so there's not much room to wiggle. We did change a little bit of the allocation, so you'll see from the 2018 budget to the 2019. Not to say that water and wastewater budgets have gone up. They've remained the same or gone down just a little bit, I believe. But we did allocate some more to the wastewater from water, so. Sorry, did anybody else have any questions about that one? And for the water services, the city of Grand Forks has approximately 1,959 connections between the residential, commercial, and industrial. We're looking at our industrial connections and how we can do kind of a single point or possibly a couple points of service for the water department. And of course, our annual maintenance for flushing, we flush and try to do some valve maintenance, maintain the fire hydrants. We have to go through all the fire department or all the fire hydrants within a certain amount of time. So we went through, we painted them all, we numbered them all, we did inspections, and we tore down, I think there was about 25 last time we went through them all. So.
Little off topic, but since it's water and metering, if a project like what we have in front of us now for Mobile Home Park, 25 units, would it be bulk metered at the curb stop, or do we go and individually meter all those?
I would prefer if it's a single property that we do it at the property line. So we meter for everything. There's just less issues, less hassles. It's consistent with our industrial and other commercial properties.
You do that at Triangle Gardens, I think, you know?
That was prior to me taking this position, and it was where they put it in each individual.
Yes, they did.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And it's a problem.
It is, yeah. So that we're looking at how we can correct that. So whether it's a larger meter, because they also have their own fire hydrant on that property. So when they do maintenance or whatever, then you know we can account for that water.
So 19th Street, the same thing?
They were serviced with the possibility of future growth in behind, so we recommended that they put a meter on property line. So. And here's the budget, and again, it's for the other two people from the water and wastewater and the administration allocation.
Anything in this budget for training?
We have training between, it depends which area we're focusing on for the year, but we go through the four-man crew and we pick one or two people that need specific training to get ticketed. So we're looking at trying to get wastewater treatment for one of the operators, and working towards a level 3 with the coordinator on that one. So there will be some training specific for those two, and as a group, as a whole, there will be some like confined space training or excavation. I think this year it's excavation and shoring trainings. Yeah. We do have a rolling plan for all of outside works, so everybody has certain tickets that they try to maintain, and Daniel's helped with some of the online training that we have in place. So.
Okay, so since you mentioned it, so we do have someone with their thumb on who needs training for what, when, type of thing?
Yes.
Okay.
Any other questions about this one? I should mention our two utilities, the water and wastewater, we're looking at trying to gain electrical efficiencies. So we have some large motors with our well sites and with our lift stations. So we're looking at trying to, I guess, best utilize peak demands and how we operate all the systems concurrently. So if we're having, watering times in the evening, when everybody's at home and they're cooking dinner and doing laundry and have the air conditioning going in the summer, may not be the best time. So we're looking at changing things this last spring, but hopefully we can put something together for this next year where we focus the watering time more in one section, like the morning, where the air conditioning needs are less, and there hasn't been the overnight demands on a few things that kind of balance things out.
Okay, I'm gonna ask another one. SCADA system, communications, utilities, older system, working well. Are we looking for an upgrade, software upgrade or anything like that down the road?
Yeah, it's working fairly well. We're gonna do an audit this year on it. So we'll just check some of the math behind it, make sure that we have meters in the correct place with water and wastewater, and make sure that we're getting an accurate count. So we're trying to basically look at the production amount from the wells and what we capture through the meter reads, and see how close we are with that. So.
But we're not expecting a $100,000 hit next year for a new SCADA system or anything like that?
So the software on that is roughly about 10,000 or so. The system itself was $5,000 worth of computers, unless the PLC components have to be replaced. That's one thing. They use two different types of communication. One of them is fiber for almost all the sites, and the other part is wireless still. So the wireless is the backup, the fiber is the primary source. We've doubled up wherever we could and built redundancy into the systems. There's two devices there. So the last time they were replaced was what now, 4 years ago? I think so. The towers were replaced 4 years ago. So we may have to do the same again in probably about 2 to 3 years, but it's ongoing cost of running that system.
Yeah, if I had a good 20-year capital plan, I'd probably ask that question.
Yes.
So, to entertain me for a minute, the city generates water, right, and it disposes of water. Is what comes out the same as what goes in? And if not, what's the difference?
Once we run it through both systems?
Yeah, well,
measure-
we're supplying water, and the water's coming out. Do we measure the outfall of water? Do you have an idea of how much volume of water goes into the lagoon?
Yes, we do.
And does how does it compare to the amount of volume of water that the wells produce?
The summer is the big wild card there. So
Yes,
I think you could get a fairly close estimation of what was consumed or used
Yes.
throughout the households, but we use, and I forget the number, whether it was 40 or 60% of our annual water in 2 months.
in 2
summer,
months,
so,
yeah. But that, and of course, that's disappearing water too. It's not coming out our sewer.
No,
It's just sort of
sprinkling
disappearing.
Or gardens or different
Right.
applications
And
during
in
the
the,
summer.
and in the wintertime, when we not watering or sprinkling,
Right.
is it about equal, or is it closer, or what?
No, it's not equal yet. Like I say, we're still working on the difference between what is produced and what's metered.
Right,
So we'd have to get that within a certain amount to
Okay.
have certainty with what was going on. So,
and then compare that.
yeah. We did do some snapshots this year. So we took our engineering tech, our GIS person, went out and did the meter reads one day. We downloaded that information. We went out the next day, same time, same route, did the same data collection, and we compared the two to see just how close we were. So
Right,
it really depends. We're looking at, as I mentioned, the industry for ensuring that we're capturing all their water.
okay.
Yeah. About there was a significant difference. We also, in doing snapshots like that and going through the meter data, I guess, it'll say where there's a constant leak or a
Yes.
slow leak or an intermittent leak. So there was one person that had, I believe some mental health issues that had their hose running for about 2 years. So we were able to go and, with some collaboration with family and that, shut that off.
Turn the hose off.
Yeah. Going nowhere, just out in the backyard, just.
Into the ground.
Yeah. But probably the equivalent of about 4 east zone reservoirs.
Yes.
So it's valuable that we go out, we do those data collections and try to cut down on different unique circumstances that come up, so. So here we are, the audit the well production against the meter. Educate the residents about water conservation, as Mr. Gates mentioned. Improve the water supply to the airport and West End. Improve the energy efficiency with the well operations, so that's the pumping times, and we looked at putting a new motor on our well 5 actually. The well site is well 4-5, but it's actually the bigger well out of the two, and put a VFD on that. Improve or streamline the service request. So we're looking at people with servicing, and this is part of the economic development, and how we can make that process as easy as possible for them. So I think we're making progress on there. Reviewing the water supply strategy. So we had Urban Systems do a report. Throughout the year here, we were doing those test wells in different locations. So that's proved to us that it's not as easy to pull high volumes of water out of the ground around the valley as maybe initially thought. So we're
Okay.
reviewing that water strategy and just how we're going to supply water for an increase of growth with the same water use patterns, I guess.
So you're saying the recovery rate of the wells aren't what we thought they were, or?
They don't charge fast enough.
Our current wells are great, but they're kind of located in one area, so we were looking at different areas to put them. So we thought, down by the high school would be a good location, but it didn't yield what we had hoped. We had one out by Angus McDonald, which again didn't yield quite what we hoped, and that's not that far from another major producing well, actually 2 of our production wells. So yeah, there was those 2 we looked at by Purley School as well, so just off of 73rd, I believe. And it wasn't, there was actually no water now, I believe, so.
Refresh my memory on, I think it's well 2 at Hutton, right?
Yes.
Trying to replace that or put it someplace else. It's not gonna go by Hutton, but the preferred place is now.
That's where we were doing the test wells?
Okay.
Yeah.
And so how far down the road before that expense is gonna hit our table?
Well, we have an application in for upgrade to the east zone reservoir. So we were gonna tie that with a well, but in doing our due diligence for the grant application and for getting our data in order, we had to do test wells. And that's where I mentioned that it wasn't as high yielding as needed. So we're looking at the whole water supply strategy to see if we need to keep the wells that we have online and not take any wells offline, as compared to drilling wells in different areas and going from, say, 5 wells down to 3 higher yielding wells.
Okay, I don't want to put words in your mouth, so what I'm hearing is it may be a strategy of a reservoir and water storage as opposed to another well and pumping more water. Is that right?
That's what we're looking at right now. It was originally kind of thought or modeled against that we would use the aquifer as our reservoir, But if we can't get the water out as quick as we had hoped, then we may look at other strategies for water storage.
Okay, so I'm gonna take this opportunity, and Mayor and Councilor Moslin can help me. The city at one time bought some land for a reservoir on the west end.
West side is still there.
Still there? Okay. And that's
But
in play type thing.
My understanding is that to build a reservoir there would be cost prohibitive at this point. It would be a significant capital investment to build a reservoir there.
It's definitely a significant capital investment. It's just how much you need the water and how much revenue you would be able to attain from putting it there.
As the city looks like it's growing westward, that might become more of a possibility, especially as the city continues to fight water pressure problems at the west side. A reservoir on the west side would mitigate those pressure problems.
How the system works is we have the 5 wells that's supplied into the system, and then any additional or excess water they pump up to the reservoir.
Yes?
And then once it reaches a certain point, it shuts off the transducers, it shuts off the wells, and then it's a gravity system back in. So that could be some of the pressure fluctuations you're talking about. The fire flow issues, I believe, have a lot to do with some of the pipe size that's in certain areas.
Okay.
So there's a few things to consider, I guess, when looking at whether to put a west side reservoir or additional wells or how many
Or a dam.
wells or a dam. Yeah.
That's where we got to, when we look at the cost of that west side reservoir and the short-term nature of it, it made more and more sense to really take a more serious look at the reservoir potential of the Grand Wheat.
I didn't mean that question to open up that.
You did so. You said, yeah.
So I'm not sure if there's any other questions about the water department.
Just one, the well number 1 that was decommissioned because of the gas. Is there any consideration if you drilled another well in that area, but like how far did that contamination go in the aquifer?
That I'm not sure. We didn't have enough data to make a really good decision, I guess, to be quite honest. So that's why we're reviewing the water supply strategy. There's a few other wells around the area, and we're looking to see whether we can either rejuvenate or reuse one of the existing well sites to put back into production.
Mhm.
But it would depend on how it was dealt with environmentally and whether it was fully dealt with, I guess.
Yeah.
So we'd have to do some testing and
According to the rec commission, they're finally gonna take that pump house down this
Yeah.
year, the one in the arena parking lot.
right, that was our goal
Yeah?
last year.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
It's been a good goal, it just keeps reoccurring.
Well, like I say, we did some test wells and we want to make 100% sure that we're completely done with that site.
Okay.
It still has the pump motors and everything
Really?
inside there, yeah.
Oh.
So before we tear it down and drill a hole right next to it, we're going to make sure that we don't want to do that.
Oh, so that answers Councilor Thompson's question. That plume, that contaminated plume may have moved away? Those things linger forever, that's my understanding. A contaminated plume could migrate and linger for years and years.
It depends, it can be dealt with in certain ways, but yeah, it's not inexpensive.
Right.
It's kind of like, you know, our situation to a smaller extent down at Public Works. We're gonna drill test holes around our fuel tanks just to see the
Okay.
extent of
Right.
how far it's migrated, so.
Yeah.
Yeah. But there's ways to oxygenate and to deal with the hydrocarbons, so.
Okay.
But it takes time. That's it. Any other questions or?
running out of steam, we gotta.
Yeah.
So I was gonna say to council that we could kind of stop it here for the day and start the revenue piece on the 19th, and so you can get a couple hours and a bit before the public hearing if you'd like.
I need a nap.
Then I hear that's a goal, so
Okay, that's,
thanks, David.
Good information.
thanks, gentlemen, that was good.
Yeah.
So Juliet, 1:30 then on the 19th?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.